Good morning. Would members of the Economic Development Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Good morning. Good morning. Would members of the Economic Development Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
Morning, members. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to welcome the Mayor to our Economic Development Committee meeting. Why don't you go through reading the whole thing, and then we'll just call it recess? Can I just do that? You can call it recess right now. Right. So, members, I'd like to with your permission, I'd like to call a recess and to resume the meeting at 10 o'clock. 10. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Let me just tell the public what's actually happening right now. The Mayor has been very helpful to allow us to just to start the meeting and to basically have a quick recess. Councillor Kelly is 7 minutes away. He's a member of the committee, so he'll be here. The Mayor, unfortunately, has a number meeting, and I'm very happy he was able just to step in for a few minutes, so he's not able to stay for the whole meeting. So we're able to start the meeting and recess till 10, then we will resume the meeting. So this is following our procedure. Thank you very much. We'll be back at 10. Mary?
Can only start at 10.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. When their members could take their seats. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So, welcome everyone, and welcome to meeting number 21 of the Economic Development Committee. Welcome to the members of the committee and to other members of council who are in attendance. I see none at the moment, but they may stop in. And of course, the most important folks that are here are members of the public. I'd like to welcome you here to this morning's meeting. For those of you who are with us in the room, the screen to the back, my right, and for most of you, your left in the corner there, provides you with real-time updates for the upcoming items that are on the agenda that we're dealing with here today, and also what is next. So if you are interested in terms of following along, you're able to view the list of items on the agenda there. And so for those who are following the agenda and the debate on their computers or tablets or smartphone, you could go to www.toronto.ca www.ca/council. So I hope that's pretty clear. As well as for those of you who are here, there is actually a sheet here listing the speakers if you wish to follow up. There's also another sheet, which is a yellow sheet that has 4 members here that we follow through on this. This is just a little bit of education for those who are here for the very first time. And so the Economic Development Committee gratefully acknowledges its meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat, and also home of many diverse Indigenous people. So we are meeting on the grounds here, and we acknowledge this at our meeting here at Economic Development. So thank you. I would also like at this time to acknowledge there are a number of students here in our audience, particularly the students that are from Havergal College. The girls are at the back. They're here as part of a civic engagement. I'd like to have them stand, and if you would give them a big round of applause, that'd be wonderful, because thank you very much. These are our future leaders and politicians and bankers and mums and dads and family members and so on and so forth. I know there are no boys at Havergal, is that correct? Just girls, okay. Great school, just girls. Excellent. All right, thank you. So members, we are going to proceed then with the agenda. And the first, good morning, Councillor, Speaker Nunziata, welcome. Are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Looking around, seeing none. Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask for a confirmation of the minutes of the April 7th meeting. Councillor Kelly, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carries. Thank you. All right, we have a number of speakers, and Madam Chair, we have communications and report. What this particular item here that's been presented, is it going to be, there's a speaker on this item?
There's speakers, yes.
Okay, so we'll just wait maybe till the speaker can explain as to what this particular, and there are other communications. Okay, members, you have a number of communications that are on your desk regarding items on the agenda. All right, moving right along on the agenda, we have ED 21.1, improving services for youth with experience in the criminal justice system. We have a presentation by staff, plus we have some speakers, so I'm going to hold that particular item. ED 21.2, appointments of Business Improvement Area Board of Management. Councillor Grimes is moving that report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. ED 21.3, a bid to designate Toronto as a United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization, otherwise known as UNESCO, as creative city of media arts. That's the application. I know that there are speakers on that item, so I'm going to hold that. ED 21.4, prospect for bidding on the 2022 Commonwealth Games using existing Pan Am Games facilities. Sorry. All right, Councillor Kelly is going to hold, and Councillor Grimes has an interest, so I will hold that. Councillor Kelly, in your name. Then understand. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. ED 21.5, 2017 major cultural organizations allocation. We have some speakers on that particular item. I will be holding that then. Thank you. ED 21.6, Toronto Economic Bulletin. Councillor Grimes is moving that item. Moving receipt. All those move to adopt. All those in favor? Yes. It says move receipt. Yeah. So the item says that City Council received the report. So because we're at economic development, we actually have to take an action on it and forward it on to City Council. That's the difference. Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor adopting the item? Opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving right along, we are now back to the beginning of the agenda. ED 21.1, I'd like to ask Mr. Stanley, Erwin Stanley, Director of Toronto Employment and Social Services, otherwise known as TESS, as well as the General Manager, Pat Walcott, to come forward, and also Mr. Jabari Lindsay, Manager at SDFA. So good morning, everybody, and your clock says 6:40, but I don't think you've taken that much time already. I will now, just before you speak, I want to advise the public who are here to speak to us here this morning. When your name is called and it's your turn to speak, you may come to the desk, come to the podium there, and basically position yourself in front of a microphone. Members of the public, you have 5 minutes to make your deputation and to speak. There are no extensions, there are no, I'm going to speak on behalf of a group of people, so I need more time. In the process of being questioned, you are, by members and non-members of the committee, you can respond and provide additional information, and or you will be able to garner more time through that process. I just want you to prepare yourself so that when you come to the podium to speak, you know that you have 5 minutes. You will be cut off at the 5-minute mark, okay? So I want everyone to govern themselves accordingly. Ms. Walcott, you have the floor. Thank you very much for your being here and your presentation. You may go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning to the chair and to the committee members. So I'm very happy to present this report, which is really that intersect between the social and labor market. What we're trying to highlight here is that individuals with experience in the criminal justice system face specific and significant challenges in the labor market. A criminal record and even an encounter with the criminal justice system can make it increasingly difficult to secure employment in an already tough labor market. In particular, youth are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. While youth represent 23% of Ontario's population, they account for 56% of all individuals charged with a crime. As Canada's largest and most diverse city, it's essential that we begin to more deliberately coordinate our services and supports to address the issues facing youth with experience with the justice system. In particular, we wish to work with people who want to re-enter the labor market, upgrade their skills, or participate in activities that will improve their employment prospects. We identify in the report steps that the city is taking to address the issues being faced by the unemployed and the underemployed residents who have experience with the criminal justice system. I'm going to pass the presentation over to Erwin Stanley, a director with TESS, and to Barry Lindsay, a manager with SDFA, who are going to lead us through the presentation. I want to very carefully point out that this is a joint effort between TESS and SDFA partners who continually work to support Toronto's most vulnerable youth. Also, following this, we'll be hearing from 2 speakers, Coffee Hope from the Young Black Professionals and Evan Bonas from the Labour Education Centre, who are going to be speaking about the results of one of the pilot programs in the report.
So as you see here, the next slide walks you through the whole presentation. One of the most important boxes, and Pat has already spent some time illuminating that, is the far left. Individuals with experience in the criminal justice system face specific and significant challenges in the labor market. Over the past, I'd say 10 years working with young people in the city, that particular statement, well understood by most, really is felt by folks on the front line who are trying to serve youth who basically marginalize themselves because they feel like the barrier that they have in terms of having experience with the criminal justice system is just too great to overcome. So this joint effort in this presentation, but also in the work that we've been doing for the past few years, is a way to kind of speak towards the issues that these youth face, but also making sure that their voices are heard clearly and through the system here. And Erwin will speak more to the legislation and the process around criminal record checks. But the one other piece to say is that while youth represent 23% of Ontario's population, they account for over 56% of individuals charged with a crime. So it means that there's not just issues within getting an employment or getting an opportunity for employment within the city, but also just navigating the system of trying to remunerate themselves.
How did we get to this point? In 2012, the federal government introduced new legislation. The new legislation was around record suspensions. The record suspensions changed. It used to be that before, when you had an issue, you were you can get a suspension after 3 years. Now, with the new legislation, it moved up to 5 years. For an indictable offense, it went from 5 years to 10 years. As well, the cost went from $150 to $631. Putting $631 into perspective, a single person on social assistance receives approximately $700 a month. The result of this is that less people have applied for record suspensions. It went down by 58.5% between 2012 and 2016. The reason is cost, as well as how difficult it is actually to receive a suspension. In 2010, the Ontario Health and Safety Act came up with new legislation, Bill 168. The impact of that legislation was that it put more burden on the employers to ensure there were no risks in the workplace. To resolve that risk, the employers went to more record checks. Everybody that had to apply for assistance had to go through a criminal record check. Whereas, in fact, the Ontario Health and Safety Act, that was not the intent of it. That's what employers believed they needed to do and to ensure that the people that worked for them were ones that they felt were safe. While we know as a result of offense does not mean you'll commit one in the workplace, this was something that they felt was necessary to do. Another issue with this is as a result of this legislation, as a result of this criminal check, it allowed people who chose to discriminate, it gave them a legitimate reason that they believed that they could discriminate against some clients.
So as you see here, the case for Toronto, and I don't think we would be remiss if we didn't say that this week, May 6th to the 13th, is actually Youth Week. It's the first time we've done this in a few years around recognizing the achievements and successes for youth within the city of Toronto. On Sunday, PFNR hosted one of the largest arts events called Stomp. And on Saturday, in this particular council chambers, we had over 200 young people who came to speak around violence and safety, issues of housing, transit within council chambers, and just put their voice forward. The reports will be coming soon around the things that they asked for. But as you'll see in this presentation, drilling into the actual point that Erwin made around increased criminal record checks, increased vulnerable sector checks, we have an overrepresentation of marginalized and specifically racialized populations in the justice system. And the quote that you'll see that I don't want anyone to miss that talks about the number of federally incarcerated black inmates has increased by 75%. And that black inmates now accounting for 9.3% of the total federal prison populations, while just representing 2.9%, means that we have a group of young people, specifically the youth from African descendants, who need our support and who are looking for our support. And it's not just a matter of having a particular job fair or an outreach counselor. It's a matter of trying to figure out how do we provide hope back to those young people. Tomorrow, and I'll speak more to this particular job fair later, but tomorrow we have one of the largest open calls for an employment program that's run by Toronto Community Housing. And typically 300 to 500 young people show up to every one of the open calls because they feel like it's the only hope they have at an employment opportunity moving forward. And the majority of those young people are, again, black young people that we're trying to support. So not that the issue is only thinking about young black people, but there is an overrepresentation in our justice systems that we need to speak to, which makes this not just an economic issue, but greater than that as well.
From an Ontario Works perspective, we represent about 30% of all of the Ontarians on social assistance. And we have 6,000 people that have self-declared that they've been in conflict with law. We know that number is significantly higher, but there's no question that we don't ask that question, so it's only people that so choose to declare when we have over 6,000. The most significant number you have up there is almost 50% have been on OW for more than 3 years and have declared that they are unprepared for employment. That tells us that 50% are ready for employment, and that's the issue that we have. People are being held back because they have a criminal record. We've right now just talked in generalities, and we brought different points in place. I'd like to tell you a story, and this will really show you how all this work comes into play. It's a story about a woman who was orphaned as an early child. She was raised by her aunt and went through and kept her nose clean, went to school and graduated as a personal service worker. She was doing that work for a period of time, and then she went into nursing. She went to her home country to visit and was pressured by her family to bring drugs back into the country. She was very, very nervous. The result of that is that she was caught at the border. She served her time, and when she was released, she went looking for work. Obviously, she could not enter the field that she was in. She had a very difficult time. She talks about being refused opportunities to even work in factories or in retail work. The fact that she had a criminal record, she wasn't even allowed to apply. And they went through the line and said anybody that had a criminal record would not be seeking employment. She heard about opportunities working with temporary agencies. So she went through that whole process. She did find some work through the temporary agency, but what she found was working beside her, people got significantly more money than she did. They were preying on the fact through that she needed that work. And using the temporary agency was one way of getting around that. It reminds me of we had that same situation when we had people receiving checks, and they had to go to those loans, those cash check places, and 15% or so of their money was collected before we got the benefit card. So that's when Councilor Thompson called it the dignity card, because people didn't have to spend their money inappropriately. These people are taken advantage of. You thought she came and she applied for OW. She was in social assistance, and we tried to get her employment through various places. Again, she was not successful. She applied through our job incentive program. That's a program that we have with the City of Toronto for volunteer work. She got into that program, working in our division, and then she found a job. She found a job, and you would think the story was over. But you know, that's just the beginning. The story was not over. I asked her to come today, to speak here today, so she could talk to you about her story. She refused. She refused because her current employer does not know that she has a criminal record. She refused because it's a job that ends in June, and she'd be looking for work, and she didn't want her name out there as somebody that had a criminal record. So what we have is a situation where somebody did her time. She served her time in jail, and she was out in 2014. With the previous law, she'd be eligible for pardon in 2019. Now she's not eligible till 2024. This is what I'm talking about. She has to live in the shadows with her work. She has to live in the shadows with life until 2024. This is what today is about. Whoa. Okay. Our current work. So what are we doing at the City of Toronto? There's a lot of work being done in that area. The first one we talk about is simplifying the process to obtain record suspensions. One of the things that's most important is education. What we are doing at TESS is ensuring that our staff and our clients understand what's involved in the process of getting a record suspension. It's very, very difficult. And we often have to do presentations to staff, and it involves us having to have a lawyer. We actually were doing some presentations last summer where in fact we need a lawyer, we can get a lawyer. And so the University of Toronto their law school offered up lawyers to come to our offices, to work in our offices, to help support people, to give information to our clients in conflict with the law. We'll be taking them up on that. Within the report, it talks about there's no monies right now through Ontario Works to pay for record suspensions. We at TESS have decided that we will pay for them through something called the employment-related benefits. So with that money, the $631, we will cover that cost. Now that benefit is the same benefit we apply for people that need tools for work, people that need a uniform, people that need transportation. It's probably the only benefit that I can think of where we're actually, someone is not getting anything, we're actually taking something away so that they become more employable. It's that important. So at the city, we'll be doing that to help support people with record suspensions. Number two, advance inclusive hiring practices. Here at the City of Toronto, we don't ask people about their criminal records unless it's necessary for the job they apply for. They go through the process, and if in fact they're eligible for work, they get the work. If in fact it's for some of the divisions like children's services or long-term care, it's then asked at the point of time before they receive the job, but they go through the process without asking the questions. We have the right hiring practices, and these are the practices that really should be across all employers.
So far, we've framed the issue as young people or people who have committed an offense and then have had an experience as a result. And a lot of times, the young person may be walking home from school or maybe at school and be interacting with TPS, Toronto Police Services. So it's not something through what they did, but maybe under an investigation as such. So that's where number three becomes very important, because you may not have young people who have committed a crime, as we would say, but may have been affected as part of an investigation. So what we've been trying to do through that integrated response, we call it employment connections, and we'll speak about that when we talk to the motion. But number one is increasing access to pre-employment training and support. So through the employment connections table, doing more learning forums, learning affairs throughout the full year, preparing young people who may have this as a marker for eventual employment. Number two, sharing best practices. It's been multiple years now working with our networks of youth employment agencies and the YEP and nonprofit organizations to explain to them how to handle and work with someone when they say, I have a record or I think I might have a record, and what the next steps around that would be. Number three is educating employers. This year we had a job fair where we invited employers to come to speak, and we spoke to them as well and tried to educate them that even if you're going to do the screening, here is how you find out what the results are and what the next steps are working with potential employees. And number four, our bigger event is hosting an annual job fair every year, where to be included in the job fair, you have to be on probation and parole. So the job fair is the first of many for the season, but it gives you a leg up to know that, okay, this fair I'm competing against my peers, per se. But if I decide to go to one of the multiple ones we have, I've kind of gotten my feet wet and I know where to go next to. The next part, number four, is collecting and analyzing relevant data. So we actually have, as Erwin spoke to before, self-reported data, but working with provincial ministries and working with ourselves here, we need to spend more time understanding how great is the issue, what types of services do we need to provide, and is it a navigation piece, is it an access piece, or as Erwin has said, is it a matter of just putting the financial resources forward so folks can move things together to be able to analyze and work where they want to go. Erwin, I'll go back to you for the first piece of number five. No, number five.
Advancing innovative services. We introduced the poverty reduction strategy, was passed through council last year. And one of the things on the report was us being able to access and help support people that are most in need. Now, people in conflict with the law are part of a group of individuals that becomes a larger percentage of our caseload. Next month, TESS will be presenting on our demographics, who's on our caseload. And what you'll find is that the most employable people have mostly left. And we have people that have mental health issues, all kinds of challenges. And what we're trying to do is trying to find opportunities to help those people move forward, because the best way out of poverty is through employment. And we can't give up on these individuals. One of the programs we have introduced was an intensive case management program dealing with people in conflict with law that you'll hear shortly after us. It's about us having the opportunity to work with 7. We put forward a program last year for 7 people in conflict with the law and 7 that weren't in the construction business. Through that whole process, we actually found out that 11 were in conflict with law. This goes back to people not self-declaring. Through that work, all 14 graduated and 10 have found employment. This is part of the work that we, in fact, we're trying to do, trying to open up opportunities for people that are in conflict with the law. One of the things that we're also looking at is the programs that we have. Our GIP program, that is our volunteer program, our Investing in Neighborhoods program that's working with nonprofit employers. We're looking to ensure that those programs do not marginalize people because of being in conflict with the law. As well, our purchase of employment services, we're ensuring that the programs that we buy will be conducive to helping those people in conflict with the law.
So finally, the last two advancing innovation service delivery approaches. About a year ago, Councillor Fragadakis moved a motion to accept our TYPE team, as we call it, Toronto Youth Partnerships and Employment Program. So we've had 5 case managers who are thinking about Indigenous young people, young women, thinking about newcomers, and the fastest caseload, so now that caseworker is working with 30 young people, was when we said we'd be working specifically with people with experience in the criminal justice system. We're getting referrals from all sources for that particular client base because folks are just not sure what to do. I spoke about YouthWorks, the program that does beautification across the city for Toronto community housing. The innovation in that particular program is their job fairs that they do is called an open call, so youth can attend on the day. They get an interview, they get seen by staff from Toronto Employment and Social Services and Toronto Community Housing. So if a young person is not a good fit, or they show up and they think, one of the quick stories is a young person came and said, I don't think I have a chance at this, but I just wanted to show and see what I could do, work with the Toronto Employment and Social Services staff, and then got a job as a heavy-duty cleaner later on in the year. So there's opportunities where if we just get ourselves in front of young people, we can kind of dispel those pieces. And then finally, I spoke quickly about the job fair in October during Workforce Development Month last year, and I met a young man who has his own business, and he wasn't sure if he had a criminal record or not. So no one had explained to him, you just go to the police services, you can request your own form, you can have the conversation with your own trusted people. Just because you did a record check doesn't mean it goes automatically to an employer, and because he didn't understand that, and I say young person, but I think he's 29, the understanding is that now that hump kind of disappears and there's an opportunity to move forward. So you want to go to the last one, all right? So the motion or the recommendation is you'll see in the report is to take the collaborative table with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services, Employment Ontario, and the newest addition with the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, and expand it to look at appropriate city divisions, employers, educational institutions through the Council of Educators Toronto, and training providers, and most importantly, the people themselves that are affected, and try to figure out a better coordinated approach that the city can do. We feel really proud about the work that we've been doing between Toronto Employment and Social Services and SDF&A, Social Development, Finance and Administration, but we feel like there's better people out there that know how to navigate the system that we want to work with together. So the motion speaks to us expanding the table to look for innovative solutions, data collection, and really just getting ourselves in front of residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions? If you don't mind, I'll just do questions really quickly, and then we'll go to speakers of the panel here. Are there questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none from members. I have a few. So, Mr. Stanley, you made the presentation with respect to the young person who has been affected and so on. So the average person listening to your presentation and sort of listening to some of the challenges that we're having with crime and violence, et cetera, would say, so what? I mean, they get themselves in problems and condition. Are you asking us now to simply absolve them of any responsibility or burden? That's not what you're suggesting, is it?
Absolutely, absolutely not.
Right.
The issue really is when someone does the crime, they do the time. And the expectation when someone is on probation is that they have to keep themselves out of trouble. It's not the expectation that people be victimized over this period of time. And what has been happening with people on probation is they have been victimized by how people interpret the fact that they have a criminal record that does not allow them to get an opportunity. What we do know is this, that when people lose hope or there's no work, they potentially recommit. When there's opportunity and hope, they do not. And I think that's part of the issue, is that it's about giving an option for people, not because they have a record, but because they're actually trying to better themselves.
Right. Mrs. Wolcott?
I just wanted to add to that we do require a process that's remedial in nature. So if the punitive nature of the incarceration continues, then we are cycling back and we'll end up with recidivism, with people going back into areas and problems that they were in before. So we want to help people move forward with their lives.
Can I just add one thing, though? In agreement, the final piece, though, Councillor, is that you may have people that are just doing nothing. So you may get the presumption that they'll reoffend, but you'll also have people that are caught in a state of almost paralysis, where they don't believe that they could do anything. So it's less than doing something negative again, they're just doing nothing. So you want them to feel like they have opportunities to move forward too as well.
Right. So has there been any work done in terms of looking at the correlation between those young people who have gotten themselves in the problems with the criminal justice system and then who may have been pardoned prior to the changes in 2012, and whether or not they become repeat offenders? Do we know if any work's been done in this area?
The data for that piece is done and not shared
With us?
with us.
Okay. So I'm hearing your presentation, and I've read the material here it's been provided to us. Part of what you're saying is the following. So the young people get into difficulties with the law, and particularly you talk about in your report about the racialized young people who seem to be, and blacks in general, are overrepresented in the criminal justice system and in our penal system, federal, provincially, et cetera. And I think I hear you say that they get themselves into problems, and sometimes they're having to spend the time or having to serve time, and they get out. And so there's no opportunity then for advancement because they have the stigma of a record. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And that ability to clear themselves of the record, prior to 2012, there was basically a fee that was presumably affordable, $150 or what that number was. That has changed dramatically, as well as a time frame in terms of that would allow them to be able to qualify to a pardon has changed dramatically as well. That has now basically changed to a record of suspension. Is that what that is? And that now creates a huge burden and dilemma for these young people. So in essence, you are actually amputating their future even though they've served the time. Is that what you wanted to get to us?
Absolutely. It becomes more of like a lifetime sentence, really.
Right. So we want to lock them up, put them away, bring them out, and then basically lock them up in the open.
Right.
Because now we have people who can take advantage of them. And so then what can a young person do without any help from either the city, again, province, and the Fed in terms of changing some of the rules? What are the possibilities for them? Because the young woman that you spoke about, Mr. Stanley, seems she would be in a complete limbo. Would that be the case? Would you assess that?
That's exactly. When I sat down and talked to her, she wasn't looking. She was not able to look to the future. She believed her future was very bleak because she knew this job was ending in June, and she was back to living in fear about what was ahead for her, because the only thing that she saw was social assistance and what she went through before about trying to find a job with a criminal record. And that is something that's quite devastating. Staying to talk to a young person with them living in fear, concern about where the next job is coming to, understanding that the most they would be able to receive on assistance is $700 a month. And that there is no future for some of those individuals.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are no further questions of you at this particular point in time. Thank you. We are now going to go to speakers. We have Miroslav Glavek.
Councillor Thompson, you have two speakers about the
Oh, do you want them to just follow through after you? Okay, that's fine. So we're then, okay, Marisol, just give me a moment. We have 2 additional speakers. So we're then going to ask Mr. Kofi Hope, Executive Director for the Center for Young Black Professional. And then we also have Evan Bonus, who is the Project Director, Labor Education Center. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
So you'll have 10 minutes because each of you will have 5 minutes, okay? Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes. So good morning. My name is Kofi Hope, as mentioned. I'm the Executive Director for the C Center for Young Black Professionals. My colleague is Evan Bonus. We led the Trades Connect program that was supported by TESS as part of their intensive case management pilot project. We had great success with this project. 14 youth entered who are on Ontario Works, were out of school, out of work, identified as Black and 18 to 29 years old. We had 11 graduates, and 11 of the 14 were individuals with a history of conflict with the law, and all were at risk of it. 9 were able to enter the building trades, and 10 were able to enter paid work. Unfortunately, 1 member of the program passed away during its duration. This program took C's person-centered approach to learning and provided social supports and married this with the existing building trades program that LEC had in place. I'll say that partnership was a key factor to success in this program. And let's be honest, we have a crisis facing youth in this city, particularly Black youth. We know that Black youth have an unemployment rate of 29%, the highest of any population in the city. And we spoke earlier, it was referenced the 75% increase in incarceration for African Canadians. These realities demand nuanced, specific, and targeted interventions. And not all organizations have the cultural competency and experience to do this. C does. But at the same time, employment is key to breaking the cycle of crime and violence and giving people new options. And we know our youth employment systems are not working well, especially for those farthest from the labor market. What works is not resume development and government-subsidized short-term placements, but real skills and real industry-informed pathways. But it's hard to get cultural focus and competency and all the career pathways in one place. And that's why partnership is so essential, to create the specific solutions we need for a very specific high-needs group of young people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what was unique about C's approach to work with youth in conflict with the law. The first thing is cultural competency. C, we bring the ability to work with young Black men and women who have been in conflict with the law through staff who've had years of experience doing this work, relatable life experiences, and a deep theoretical understanding of the role identity plays in the situation these youth face. The second is a focus on building long-term relationships. Trust is such an issue for these young people. Their life experiences with authority figures and mainstream systems mean trust is hard to earn. But without establishing trust, these programs don't work. Because to help empower a young person, you need to know what's going on. For example, let's say you can't travel to a job placement because the community you have to pass through has individuals that you had conflict with in your previous street engagement and you fear for your safety. Or let's say you're dealing with trauma from your time in incarceration. Maybe working in confined spaces triggers experiences you had when you were held in solitary confinement. Or let's say you've been released, but the only place you have to stay is somewhere that's unsafe and insecure because drugs are still being sold in the premise. These are the complexities faced by the young men and women who want to change their lives, who we serve. And these are the things that lead to them being late for work, not showing up for training, struggling to complete tasks. And the shame and stigma attached to conflict with the law means they rarely tell their employers or trainers what's actually happening. And so people just say, oh, but he's lazy. Oh, they're not committed. Oh, he just doesn't want this. It's only through building relationships of trust, like we do at C, that we can find out what are the barriers holding these folks back, and then help them to solve them. We do this by starting every program with a 3-day retreat for all staff, including test case workers that were involved, and participants. There we do a lot of personal development and storytelling. So we don't just assemble classes, we create a community, and after 3 days of bonding, suddenly youth are willing to come to us on that bus ride home and begin telling us what's happening in their lives. Things other programs may not learn till month 6, we're able to learn right at the beginning, where we are able to put together a suite of supports for them. Then during the program, during the training, and after graduation, the same people they bonded with one of who always has a master's of social work, continue to do ongoing relationships with these young men and women, connecting at every stage of the process to help them gain work and keep it. And keeping it is the biggest barrier for young people who've had little work history and poor financial literacy. Finally, what we do is the focus on identity. Psychologists have shown that empowerment is about increasing someone's locus of control, making them feel they can actually influence things in their lives. When someone believes in themselves and their future, they will get up at 5 a.m. for a training program. They will step outside of their comfort zone for an interview. They will save money to invest in education. Many of these young people have little hope there's a future outside of the street lifestyle for them, and their sense of identity has been damaged, and their blackness is core to their identity. So all of our programs are about building a healthy sense of identity, having them feel proud in who they are, what they can achieve, and see role models in the industry who have achieved. To know Black Canadians are fully part of this society, they can achieve anything and unlearn the culture of the streets that these individuals have embraced. And we give them a new culture grounded in a strong sense of who they are. Identity is why we do things like holding a nice graduation for our program, because for many of the young people, they say it's the first time they've graduated from anything. It's why we spend $300 and do a professional photo shoot with all of them. And people say, why would you do that? But when you see the look on the young people's face after these activities, the way they're just simply beaming because they've seen that they're special, they have value, they're going somewhere in life.
So
That,
Mr.
I would
Hope,
dare say,
Mr.
is
Hope,
a secret sauce.
Your colleague will have 4 minutes to speak, so
Yes, thank you,
make
sir.
sure you've got that coordinated.
I'll just say in conclusion, people talk about social capital, and that's key to what we do. This idea of bonding and bridging, helping folks to bond together with folks of their own identity within the Black community, but giving them the confidence and strength to bridge, to step out of their community and connect with those from other places. How do we do that? We do that through wraparound supports, through a retreat, one-on-one coaching, and mentorship. This provides the foundation to the program that allows them to take advantage of the opportunities provided at the Labor Education Center, our partner.
Okay, good morning. My name's Evan Bonus. I am the project director for the Labor Education Center. So my main objective is to ensure that the youth are prepared to enter the construction trades. And I do that through hands-on projects, class certifications centered around the construction trades. And these are recognized by the industry and our unionized partners. And without the proper accreditations needed for the trades, countless youth in our communities and existing members within the trades themselves are unable to set foot on site. And that's really important, you know, to ensure their success. And another main objective of mine is to make the road to construction trades more accessible. And I do this through the relationships I've built through my 18 years of experience with the different trades, and having the youth certified to understand the hazards in the industry. It empowers them, right? It makes them make the proper choices to stay safe, and flourish in our industry. And it also displays the commitment to our partners by always aspiring to exceed the industry standard, by doing a tailored type of approach, looking at the needs of the industry and matching it up with our participants. And currently, because of many of the projects, including the Eglinton Crosstown, there is a shortage of work in the trades. And, you know, we have a lot of people in the community who we can reach out to. And the trades, and there have never been a better time to reach out to the community to help build these cities and to solidify the dream of prosperity with our communities, industry, and our union partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for any of the speakers? Okay. Seeing none, thank you both very much. All right, moving right along, Mr. Glassett. Mr. Glassett? Glavich. Thank you, Mr. Glavich. Come forward, please, sir. You have 5 minutes. You know the rules here.
No, it's my first time.
Ah, yes.
In my company, I hire a lot of youth, especially from Scarborough Center, the latest. One of my best staff comes from Councillor Graham's area. At that time, she was a single mother, and she was unemployed. She was 17. Her criminal record is like this thick. She did what the easiest way to get quick cash and sell a few hard drugs. She has a record. We all have we all were young and stupid at some point. You know, youth, especially with a criminal record, depending on the record, it should be giving a second chance. Councillor Kelly ran for, I think it was the mayor of Scarborough one time, and you didn't win. Your constituents eventually gave you a second chance, and you won Ward 40, you know? It happens. There's other Councillor Holland ran against Adrian Heaps. She lost the first time. 4 years later, her constituents gave her a chance, you know? I have a little bit of a criminal record myself of just not being nice to judges when I'm in court for speeding tickets. Oh, boy.
Got to be nice in the chair.
I'm always nice. You're my favorite counselor. I have never criticized you
Thank
in
you.
my 6
Thank
years here.
I
And
thought Councilor Grimes was.
Yeah.
Used to be.
He left. Anyways, we all mistakes are past. Should know. That staffer from Councillor Grimes' ward, she's one of my best staffers. She takes great care of her daughter. She's changed. We all make mistakes, you know, especially black youth, which is a lot in my company. They get discriminated just because they're passing by, or if you live in Jane and Finch, you know. The past is the past. If you serve time in jail, you pay for your crime. You should move on. The presentations and the previous person, I think it's a woman that did the presentation, the life sentence, you know. I'm no different than if I didn't have the record. I didn't commit murder or something. Just I have a mouth. When I was young, like a teenager, and I spoke, and give an attitude because I didn't like authority back then, you know. You guys could set an example. 10 years ago, I used to work for a member of parliament in Canadian Parliament, and he in the summer hired youth, and specifically people with not the best track record to lead an example. You know, you people can do that. Like Councillor Thompson, there's great youth in Scarborough. I think they're the best youth in the whole entire city. I'm biased because I live in Scarborough, you know, but. You should give them a chance, you know. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Glapsley? Nope. Thank you. See none. We have our next speaker is Mr. Derek Moran. Mr. Moran, are you here? Thank you. You are also no stranger to the podium, sir, so you have 5 minutes, and are you ready to go? Fantastic. Thank you and welcome.
Take notice that the crown is the surety for Mr. Derek Moran, the person I have. I'm Derek. My mom called me Derek. I just want to thank you, actually. I want to thank you, actually, for what you said at the beginning, for referring to the public here as the most important people here in the room. I just wanted to share something most people don't know, that then Federal Finance Minister Joe Oliver told me that the people own the government and that the government is owned by the people. Technically, we're all beneficial owners of an equitable interest in all this. And you are absolutely right when you say govern ourselves accordingly, as Ontario is a common law jurisdiction where the rules of equity apply also. So in this report, it mentions these include the Toronto Police's Transformational Task Force Report Action Plan, the Way Forward, which highlights the need for additional strategies to address police distrust among youth, and especially black youth. Well, I'm telling you, I got the best idea on what to do about addressing police distrust among youth, and especially black youth. The highlight of the Transformational Task Force for me was the consultation that was actually held here in City Hall Chambers on a Saturday morning. They filmed it. I took a screenshot. I made a meme out of it. Here's me holding the mic here. He's not here, but City Hall, Miguel, the City Hall monitor, Miguel's here. Yeah, sure, I guess I can. Okay, So it's blurry there, but there's in that picture there's Staff Sergeant Greg Watts, and the white sleeve there is Frank and Superintendent Frank Bergen, and behind him would be Chair Andy Pringle. The question I had, paraphrasing for the officer, was Scott Duncan says the Crown is the surety for the person we all have. Is that true? Now, it took a while to get there, but eventually the police officer who answered my answer was, if you're talking about the person who's charged, and keep in mind charged is an accounting term, then the answer is yes. And I don't know if anyone that registers with anyone, but that is the finest form of open and honest and accountable and transparent government that there will probably ever be. I'll just switch back over here. So I would suggest that in the future that the youth, because part of the transformational task force is getting out there and community engagement. Like, don't be afraid to talk to the police. So every youth, black youth, no matter what color you are, go, when you see a police officer, walk up to them and say, hey, peace officer, I heard that the Crown is the surety for the legal person I have. Is that true? And just see what they say. So the phrase criminal justice system is also mentioned 18 times in this report. One of your successors, Councillor Thompson, at the Toronto Police Services Board a while back, Ken Jeffers, was enlightened enough while speaking to someone with his 5 minutes, I forget exactly what the context was in which it came up, but he brought up the conspiracy or conspiratorial nature of the criminal justice system. That's discussed by some people out there. Section 1 of the Criminal Code says this act may be cited as a criminal code. In the Dictionary of Canadian Law, the first definition given for the word act is a statute. Now, here's the problem with the criminal code some of these kids, youths, run into no one realizes, and it can be figured out by following along with this Supreme Court of Canada case, Tropwood AG versus Savacco Wire and Nail 1979. Canadian maritime law means the law that was administered by the Exchequer Court of Canada on its Admiralty side by virtue of the Admiralty Act or any other statute. This definition of Canadian maritime law in Section 2 refers to the law that was administered by the Exchequer Court by virtue of the Admiralty Act or any other statute. The reference to the Admiralty Act is undoubtedly to the Act of 1934, but the Admiralty Act of 1891, although it was repealed, may certainly be considered as any other statute. Remember, criminal code is an act is a statute, any other statute. Maritime law is the jurisdiction that applies when one is on the water. But here in reality, as I mentioned earlier, Ontario is a common law jurisdiction where the rules of equity apply also. We are on dry land. There is no water. So does everyone see the problem now with acts and statutes, and in this case, the criminal code? You know, these kids, at least the ones who didn't do anything wrong, you know, actually harmed someone, created an injured party, the doctrine of corpus delicti, have nothing more than what famed animal rights activist and internet jurist Scott Duncan refers to as boat law being improperly applied against them. It's the wrong jurisdiction that's being improperly applied against a lot of these kids.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Moran. Are there any questions for our speaker?
Objection, I'm not Mr. Councillor Thompson.
Okay. I'm going to have to overrule you, Derek, but it's Derek, right? Thank you very much. There are no questions of you. Thank you very much.
Objection, I'm not a Mr. I've executed the trust with Her Majesty, by the way.
Well, very briefly, Mr. Chair, a lot of information in this report, a lot of statistics. I think most of us were aware of the larger picture, but one of the unexpected pieces of information that I learned in the report is contained on the bottom of page 4 in our agenda. The last paragraph that says there has been widespread agreement in academic research that past criminal convictions are not correlated with a likelihood to commit a work-related offense in the future. And I think that's very important information for us to have before us. And that's not only before us, but should be taken out there to the public, and in particular to the businesses of the City of Toronto. I think what this says is if you're going to look at a person for a job in your company, large or small, look at the skills that they bring, and not at a record that would appear to have no bearing whatsoever or minimal bearing on their performance as an employee. The second point I'd like to make is that it's going to be really critical to create improved services in this area because not only are jobs changing, new jobs being created, but many of the new jobs that are being created are very sophisticated. Jobs that, and I'll illustrate, for example, I went to an opening of a Lexus dealership, and I was talking with the manager of the parts and repair section, and he said, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, engines were mechanical in their operation, and the relationship between parts was pretty basic. Today, he said, you have to be an electronic engineer to be able to monitor and repair the engines that are in cars today and will be in cars increasingly in the future. And he said the mechanics are sent back to school every year or so to catch up on just the basics of their occupation. So it's just going to get harder and harder to improve skills of people who are basically unskilled or underskilled in the future. And given that challenge, I think that these sorts of improvements have to be supported and enlarged because this is a critical social issue in the city of Toronto, and we've got to bring everything that we can to bear to meet that challenge. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Are there any further speakers? Okay. So I'm going to speak on the item. I have a motion, and the motion is on the screen that City Council requests the Premier of Ontario, Minister of Children and Youth Services, and Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services to review their current reintegration and discharge program for youth aged between 16 to 29 to ensure it better prepares them for re-entry into the community. Such review would apply to those who are released directly from a provincial correctional facility or those who are released from court after serving time in the provincial facility. Let me first of all congratulate the staff on an excellent report. It's very detailed and focused. Let me also, as Councillor Kelly has highlighted, the fact that it appears that information is coming forward that's very helpful to us. There are a lot of young people out there who are suffering and are impacted by decisions that are made because they're young, and so I don't think that we need to kind of castigate and penalize them for the entirety of their lives, because as we're hearing, it's becoming really problematic and difficult for them to advance themselves, because many would like to because they have made a mistake, and so we need to find ways to help them along. I think it's important that Mr. Stanley spoke about that young woman who had the issue with respect to with the criminal justice system and what she went through. And she was trying to better herself and found herself being sort of pulled back into that quagmire. And she's being suffocated by our own rules. And so the thing that we have to ask ourselves, if young people make a mistake, are they given another opportunity to be able to help themselves? And if not, then we should just basically lock them up forever. I'm not advocating that, of course, because that's really silly and stupid, to be quite frank with you. What we are saying is that we need to give them an opportunity to be able to extricate themselves from the challenges and the fact that they've served their time and so on and so forth. But we have now made it more difficult because we've had a lot of issues around crime and so on and so forth. And so we've actually sort of commingled all of this together in order then to try to appease and to make people feel safer based on legislation and so on. I don't necessarily think that it does make them feel safer, but maybe there's an appearance of it. But what it actually does, it has a far-reaching implication and effect on those who are affected by it. Think about it. If you put your own self in that particular situation, having committed a crime when you're young, and you feel, okay, great, I've done my time and want to be able to advance myself, and you find that you can't because of the rules and regulations, and then others use the rules in their favor to either pay you less because they can and so on and so forth. So you demoralize, you amputate the spirit of these young people. the more that we amputate the spirit of our young people, the more they become involved in criminal activities and engaging in the activities that we don't want them to be involved with and so on. And particularly for young black youth in the city. They're already under the, or behind the 8 ball, as has been stated, because of the diversity of their skin color. And I'll say this, because it happens. Right? There's no denying it. You can deny it all you want, but the truth of the matter is, the reality is you have to be in the skin that they're actually in order to feel the impact of what's actually being done to them. As our society is, we are a decent society, we're a civil society, and I think we want to remind people of some of the decisions, some of the impact of those decisions on the very people that we are trying to help. We've heard about the number of the overrepresentation of blacks in the penal system. Why is that, we have to ask ourselves? And we hear about young people who want to get ahead and having committed some offense. And they can't because the rules now are so stacked against them. So if we're basically suggesting that they're destined to a life of subsistence in our decent society, I think that we need to really revisit this situation. So in the penal system that I'm quite familiar with, because I've been to the jails to talk to young people, talk to prisoners who are going to be coming out, there are no training, there are nothing that they can do to help themselves on re-entry into civil society. When they come back, they are basically left to fend for themselves. There's nothing that's happening for them now. I've spoken to the ministry, I've spoken to the ministers, I've spoken to folks about that. I think we need to take a look at that, because what will actually eventually happen, they will re-offend and continue to re-offend. We continue to spend a lot of money to keep these people housed in jails and the penal system. It costs us more to actually keep them there than it actually does to actually train them for a job and opportunity. And we're hearing that there are skills jobs that are available, that are needed of young people, young, fresh, talented people, and we need to kind of revisit how we see this. We're not suggesting for 1 minute that I'm supporting young people committing crime, creating conditions in our society that is inappropriate. What we are saying is that once they have done that, we want to find a way to help them and advance themselves and try to make sure more people and young people stay away from crime and are actually involved in good things, but we have to create the opportunities. So that's my motions, okay? All right, seeing no further speakers. So we're actually going to vote on the motion first. Okay, so on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And I know that we want to move right along because I know that we are. Yes.
2-minute recess.
Okay, members, I'm going to thank you, Councillor Frakax. We're going to take a 2-minute recess for members to have a quick break. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll be right back. Okay, members, meeting is resumed. Sorry, Mark. All right, so we are now moving to ED 21.3, bid to designate Toronto as a, pardon? Sorry, Councillor Frakadex, point of order?
Yes, sorry, I was just wondering just to save some time, I understand that Councillor Kelly, who's holding item 4, had a quick question. If we could just go to that since we don't have any
You want to
speakers.
vary in order just
That's
to do
what I
that
was gonna
quickly?
ask you.
Okay, that'll be fine. All those in favor oppose, that's carried. Councillor Kelly?
How many other cities are bidding? Any proposed costs for the bid?
So on the first question, 4 countries have expressed an interest. As you may know, Durban was supposed to host the 222 Commonwealth Games, but the Commonwealth Games Federation pulled it from them, I guess is a blunt way of saying it.
Understand.
And then they asked for countries to declare interest. 4 have. Australia, which is holding the 2018 Games. The UK, which held the 2014 Games in Glasgow, and Malaysia and Canada. And we do not know yet how much it would cost to hold or to bid. That we need to do some in-depth work on.
And would you say that the economic returns that were experienced in Glasgow were typical of the games that were held in other municipalities?
I think Glasgow is seen as one of the better set of games held, so it would be something that we would want to emulate at least.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Grimes, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say one of the countries is also bidding for 18, or have they been awarded for 18?
No, 18 is going to Australia, but they've also put their hand up for 22.
So chances are if we had a good bid, we could probably beat them? Give it to them 2 year,
One would expect that they would want to rotate countries more than doing it bang, bang like that.
would you say we're in pretty good shape too, just on the heels of the Pan Am Games with our facilities all being updated and?
We would have all the facilities. There are fewer games, more countries, fewer games, fewer sports, about the same number of participants. We would have all the facilities already in place.
Great. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, to speak on the item? Okay, I'm going to just suggest on the recommendation, it says process and timeline, basically, that it's asking for a report to report back to council, but really what I'd like to do is have this report come back to economic development, and then we'll go off to council. So if we can ask staff to make the change in the recommendation so as to report back to EDC, Economic Development Committee, and then we could move this along. Madam Clerk? All those in favor with the amendment? Okay, that's okay. As amended, item as amended. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We are now going back to ED 21.4. I'm just getting my list. ED 21.3, bid to designate Toronto as a UNESCO Creative City of Media Arts. And we have Professor Paolo Granata, University of Toronto. Professor, welcome. Thank you. You've been watching the proceedings so far, and thank you very much for your involvement in this particular process. You have 5 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. City councillors, members of the Executive Committee, members of the public, really appreciate this opportunity to come and speak this morning. So currently, I have the privilege to be a visiting professor at the University of Toronto. I teach at the University of Bologna. Bologna is not only home of the oldest university in the Western world, Bologna, since 2006, is also a UNESCO Creative City for music. I was a champion and a strong supporter of that designation. At that time, I used to chair an international university jazz festival presented by the University of Bologna. I myself experienced how meaningful was, and actually is, that designation, not only in the field of music, but also for the overall cultural and creative industries in terms of identity, networking, and sustainability. I came to Toronto. Indeed, I was attracted to Toronto because of its diverse cultural climate and because of its unique intellectual heritage in the field of media and communication, arts and technology, as well as urban sustainable development. Some brilliant intellectuals such as Harold Innis, Marshall McLuhan, Glenn Gould, Jane Jacobs, in fact, from Toronto, took the world by storm. These cultural pioneers came to be known as the Toronto School of Communication, sharing the belief in technology as the fundamental process that structures minds and societies and leads the development of any artistic and cultural expression. In particular, McLuhan's charisma was instrumental in drawing worldwide attention to media arts. So, from outside, this is Toronto, a cradle of diversity and a group of intellectual giants who fired our global imagination by their creative and prescient vision. Indeed, the impact of this vibrant legacy took Toronto to cultivate itself as a creative city. Since late 90s, Toronto initiated an exciting and ongoing creative renaissance. In July 2000, a first working document called for Toronto to use its arts, culture, and heritage assets to position itself as a global cultural capital. In 2003, the City Council adopted a 10-year action plan to guide the city's cultural development in the belief that culture and creativity are essential to Toronto's economic future. And more recently, under the leadership of Councillor Thompson, a new action plan for Toronto was released, conceiving creativity as a strategic factor for urban sustainable development. Well, now is the time. Now is the time to make an ambitious, brave, and compelling effort for Toronto's cultural renaissance. It's time for Toronto to take its place among the greatest and leading creative cities of the world. Also, if designated, Toronto will be the largest creative city of the network of North America. So I'm here speaking even on behalf of the University of Toronto, which is working for that designation, particularly to ensure an active participation of all relevant stakeholders in the field, as well as to gather the necessary information on the cultural assets, experiences, and expertise of the city. The University of Toronto is proudly committed to fully integrate culture and creativity into its local and global development strategies and plans. The University of Toronto and its vibrant community is committed to act as the University for Toronto, conceiving the UNESCO designation as a chance to establish a permanent focus on the creative city and building a long-term vision and sustainable initiative where research, education, and public engagement play a fundamental role to make Toronto a better place to live, to learn, to work, and creatively thrive. To conclude,
yes, quick.
In 1998, the beginning of its cultural renaissance, Toronto chose a beautiful and unique motto: diversity, our strength. Ultimately, diversity is the mother of creativity. And the quality
Professor,
of
I've got to ask
diverse.
you to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Are there any questions for the professor? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Professor. All right, on the item, members, anyone wishes to speak, ask questions of staff? Okay, I will then, Mr. Williams, I will ask you a question.
Yes, Councillor.
So, Mr. Williams, you would agree with the professor that this is a creative city?
Yes.
and we have been working in all of the areas that's been identified here in the report. Talk about music, media arts, and so on as part of our focusing on film, television, and music, and so on. This would actually be a real asset and benefits to the city to have this designation.
Very much so.
It would be part of our marketing, branding that would help us to really position ourselves, and the professor has indicated, globally.
Correct.
Right. And do you have any concerns with respect to moving forward with this particular item?
Not at all.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right, members, I would simply thank the professor for your service and your energy and passion for Toronto. We like it when people come to the city and recognize the things that we all recognize, and in fact, things that some of us take for granted. So, Professor, if I had the ability to give you the keys to the city, I would be bestowing it on you because you've done us a great service, and your passion and energy is contagious, and I want to make sure that others are aware of it. So we do thank you very much for your bringing this particular matter to our attention. We also, of course, thank the University of Toronto for, first of all, having you, and secondly, for agreeing to work with us, because they're a great institution that has done great work in the City of Toronto. We continue to work with UFT, and so thank you very much, Professor. So, members, we have the item here. There's a recommendation. We are going to basically, all those in favor of the item, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. So we will be moving right along. All right. So, members, we are now moving to, Madam Clerk, we're good? So item number 5, ED 21.5, 2017 Major Cultural Organization Allocation. I have a Brian Hendricks, who is the first speaker. Mr. Hendricks, is that Mr. Hendricks? Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Hendricks, you have 5 minutes, sir, and you may start as soon as you, I'll start your time as soon as you sit. Thank you very much, sir. Please begin.
Hi there, my name is Bryn Hendricks. Thank you for your time. In front of you, you should have a coil-bound binder that has approximately 9,000 signatures requesting that the police be permitted within the parade. And I know that there's been some media today discussing the fact that the police are not banned and that they are welcome, just not in uniform. I think it's a bit of a different spin than was presented before, but it doesn't change the fact that police are not welcome in uniform to participate fully and celebrate. So you have 9,000 signatures there, and I've also provided a copy of the CAP report, which is the Community Action Panel report. That is a report that was designed by through thousands of consultations. When this issue came up, a similar issue came up years earlier with regards to QIA, and in that report, there is a dispute resolution process that is designed specifically to help address matters like this, so that they don't become so contentious in the way and divisive in the way that we've seen this happen. I have a nice little speech here that I spent about 2 weeks working on to make sure that every word in here was what I felt and what I thought would get me in the least amount of trouble from people that I was pretty sure were going to analyze everything that I'm saying. But I'm not going to use that right now. It's on the USB, and I'm happy to share a copy of it with anybody else who wants it. But I'm going to speak a little bit more, I think, from my heart, because I think that's more relevant right now. Last night, Olivia, who is the executive director for Pride Toronto, issued a statement, and it was posted about bringing people together and the us versus them mentality. And while I wholeheartedly agree with what she's saying, that we need to avoid that, I don't believe that the approach that's been taken has done anything to prevent that. in her acknowledgements, she and Pride have not been part of the conversation that has been going on. There's been thousands and thousands of comments on this issue, of which Pride has not responded to any of them. And 9,000 signatures is nothing to scoff at. So I know full well, Council, that you're going to approve the funding today. I know how this works. But I'm going to suggest instead that there be a motion by the time we get to the 24th, when this actually gets voted on by all of Council, that instead of defunding, I don't think we should be defunding Pride anymore. I initially was going to suggest that I felt that we should. We should not be defunding Pride. We have to think longer term. We had to think longer term when we created the CAP report back when we had the quiet issue. But what I do feel is that it is hypocritical to, on one hand, say that we do not want police marching in uniform, celebrating the oppression that they have overcome within their own occupation, but that we then are okay with having the police provide security at that same time. That's hypocritical, and it's not acceptable, and I think that we know that. I think that our hearts and minds guide us to reject exclusion, and I think it's not just mine, I think yours does too, and I think you know and feel that. And so it is important to recognize that the Toronto Police Association has made this request of Council for a reason, and that police deserve to be respected too. And this is not about the argument that, well, the uniform is not necessary and that the weapons are not necessary. It is part of their identity and the pride and the work and the effort that have went into this relationship with the police has been extensive. So I would urge Council to consider a motion that asks for Pride to pay for the policing, which is about $750,000. I would encourage Council to continue with the $240,000 grant. But I would encourage Council to ensure that Pride pays for the police if they require that security, then they ought to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Are there questions of the Speaker? Okay, visiting Councilor Nunziata has questions of you, sir.
Just, Mr. Hendricks, so you are, I don't have a copy of the binder because I'm not a member, so who are you affiliated with?
So I'm not affiliated with anybody. I mean,
okay.
I have worked extensively in the gay and lesbian community. I used to be on the board for the Chamber of Commerce, for Toronto PFLAG. I was the creator of, the founder of Liberal Pride, the national LGBTQ liberal organization. I worked for a Gal Canada Human Rights Trust, which was the equal marriage organization and the national advocacy organization. And I also worked for Bill Graham, the leader of the opposition on Parliament Hill. I worked for the Indigenous minister. I've done just extensive work within the community, both in Toronto, Vancouver, and Ottawa. So that's me.
So you were able to get the binders of all the petitions?
So worked with Christine in Ottawa, who created that petition to collect all 9,000 signatures.
Okay. So what you're recommending, if I understand correctly, is that that the security for the parade be not provided by police services.
Yeah, the taxpayer should not.
They pay for the security.
The taxpayer should not be paying for the hypocritical application of police services. If they're not welcome to celebrate, we certainly shouldn't be providing that at the taxpayer's expense.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nunziata. Bring this into committee. Councillor Grimes. I'm bringing it into committee. Councillor, she's not. Yeah. So, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Nunziata is not.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. This community advisory panel, this document here, would you know where this came from?
Yeah, so that was created by, so Pride Toronto commissioned that following the Quiet report, following the Quiet issue back in 2011. So that was done by Pride Toronto.
Okay, and you mentioned the dispute resolution process. I was looking in here, I couldn't find it. Could you point me to that?
Sir, so I don't have a copy. They took my extra copy, but it is towards the end, and there's a whole. So part of the process is that they actually bring in dispute resolution officers, and that they're supposed to, but Pride voted to supersede that. At the AGM, that was really hijacked in my view. They voted to supersede the dispute resolution process and just completely ignore it entirely.
So that was never adopted in 2011.
Oh, this was adopted, absolutely. Yeah, the entire thing was adopted. It's just been shelved and nobody's looked at it.
Okay, but this was adopted by Pride.
Yes.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay,
You'll
thank you very
find me,
much.
you point that out to me if you could.
Sure, sure. Just give me a minute to find it for you here. I think under page... there's an entire section on it, so I apologize. It's a rather large document.
You still have time, so take your time. You're
Okay.
using the counselor's 5 minutes.
Okay. Let's see here. There is. Oh, here we go. So on page of the executive summary, just for example, on page 19 of 21, so near the beginning, you'll see a dispute resolution. And then there is another even more robust section on that, but
So 19 and 21, and did you say it was at the end too?
in the executive summary, and then there is here we go. Even under so you'll see it's referred to throughout. So let's say, for example, page 136, you can see it refers to the DRP, the dispute resolution process.
136?
Yep, it refers to the dispute resolution process there. There's a.
Okay.
See if I can find the entire DRP section. It's funny, I've looked at this thing so many times.
Maybe just speak to the process and how what it says in here?
Yeah, just I can.
What is the process?
So essentially, what it comes down to is that when there's a matter such as that occurred at Pride, within 30 days, it is expected that somebody file a complaint, which there was one filed, a very in-depth one, which has been also ignored. But when that is filed, then it is up to Pride to bring together a number of dispute resolution officers that then follow a set of criteria in how to address both sides of the issue. In January, when they had the AGM, they voted to completely sidestep all of that, so that they didn't bring in any dispute resolution officers. And when I met with Olivia to discuss this, she wasn't yet familiar in her new role. In fairness, she only started in February. She wasn't yet familiar with the DRP. But subsequently, there has been no effort to even acknowledge it, to bring it, to utilize it. And we're here today now with this very divisive issue that could have been brought and should have been brought forward through the dispute resolution officers.
Great. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay. Councillor Kelly?
The 9,000 signatures, are they from the LGBTQ community?
All across the board. So it was posted through change.org. Change.org allows for people anybody who feels that way to join that movement.
And basically Torontonian?
Yeah, if you look at the predominant number of signatures are from Toronto. So you can see by the postal codes and in the city, the vast majority of them are from Toronto. But there are people from all around the world, actually. And I think we counted like 37 or 38 different countries. But the vast majority of them are from Toronto.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Mr. Hendricks, I wonder if you can just help me, and I guess also help the clerk, just to understand the signatures that you put here and put forward, or the actually names, because they're not, but it's online signature?
Yeah, so I put the link there as well, so you can see how people.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And so this at this time, is it being presented at some point to council, or is this to your organization?
It's been presented both to, we've already sent a copy of it to Pride.
Okay.
So that was presented to the executive as it was written, but it was also sent out by a message to the people who participate, like in that they were aware that it'd be coming to council, and it's also been presented to the province.
All right, and so at some point, this is going to be presented to council. Today, you've just given it to this committee.
Yeah, so if
Sure,
let me
just finish the point. What are you hoping to achieve, apart from the fact you've given us with the names and so on? Are you hoping us to do what with this list of names?
So really, it was really just how you choose to vote on the funding is up to you. I was really
but
hoping
this has nothing to do with the voting. This just has to do with sort of the names. I mean, I'm just wondering, what is it? Will this at some point be submitted at council, or there will be other names coming forward? What do you hope to achieve with this?
That's an interesting question. So I think petitions that are presented with the signatures, what's hoped to be achieved is what the statement on the petition is. We'll bring another version forward when the council votes on the 24th.
My point, sir, is that petitions are presented at council, not generally at committee. That's really I'm just saying. So I just wanted to kind of
Sure. So
okay, that's fine.
procedural. Sorry,
Yeah,
we'll
that's all I
bring
wanted to
another one
clarify.
forward.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Question of staff. Just this opportunity. Questions of staff. Any members? No, there are. No. I just wanted to make sure we can tee that up. So questions of staff will come later once everyone's finished. I just want to remind you. Okay. All right. So we are hearing the other deputies. Yes, we are. So I have the next speaker. I have is Robert Maguire. Mr. Maguire.
Oh, sorry.
Robert Maguire. Robert Maguire. And call Mr. Maguire one more time. Robert Maguire. Okay, he's not here. The next person I have on my list is Adrian Cornelison.
You said it right.
Pardon me?
You said their last name right.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Please come forward. Thank you. And I will, when you're set up, sir, I will start your time. You'll have 5 minutes.
He's speaking just in addition to my...
No, that's fine. That's fine. He has 5 minutes. That's fine.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I'd say that I'm left.
Okay, so this is feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists. We're not taking enough action on climate change. I think it's about time these people got off their high horse and started looking for credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you know, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be friends with someone that says a woman's place is in the home?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So it looks like I've got your instructions here.
I think so.
Let me help you.
Let's just that bit there.
Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky.
Ambitious.
Offensive.
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong.
I want to say attacked. Misunderstood.
Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People have said that, but there is no,
Really?
there is no history. So are you then ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already.
Well,
So
I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than an argument. Yeah, you could hang out with, man.
let's go. Mind chance?
Goodness sake. You're right, mate. Fitter than I look.
Perfecto.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So basically, I think we just built a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here you are. Each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man-hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is total piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You're happy for a second then? Well, I'm having a drink.
I'm having a drink.
Yeah.
I want to discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
Cheers.
At the end of the day, mate,
About
I've
reaching
enjoyed
out to
working with
people,
you.
yeah.
And, you know, even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit down and have a
Just
beer.
engage.
I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Smash the patriarchy.
I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'd have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl. She might get a bit upset with that, but I'll have to get round that.
I'll have to tell my girl.
She'll have to lump it.
Just a little bit about me. I'm a gay parent with ethnically blended children. I'm disappointed in how Pride has been handling this particular situation. It is basically, I've taught that inclusion is we live in an inclusive society. And what I've experienced in the last couple of months with regards to the direction that Pride Toronto has taken is very divisive. It is not beneficial for anyone to use a very divisive approach in trying to resolve a situation.
Thank you, sir. You're at 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our speaker? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Our next speaker is Olivia Newha, Pride Toronto. Olivia? And I don't know if I pronounced your last name properly. Perhaps you can help me with that.
Sure, it's Nuema.
Nuem. Okay, I have that now. Olivia, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. It's much appreciated. I think, firstly, I would say this, and it's the most important part of why Pride Toronto is here. We are the biggest festival in this country. We bring in the biggest dollar amount into this city. Our audiences are the biggest of any festival that you run in this city. We are truly a community-led festival, having 2,000 volunteers and over 100 active volunteers throughout our 12-month period. And I'll say this about who we are as an organization. We are a queer movement. That means our priority are the LGBTQ+ community. And in that, we think it's important to listen to what every aspect of our community has to say. In this instance, last year, an aspect of our community had something to say about a parade that they design and that they run, about how that parade is designed, planned, developed, and delivered. And we absolutely had an obligation to listen to those concerns and be seen to be actively addressing them. That matters to us as a movement. Secondly, when it comes to police participation, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The most positive aspect of what has happened through this dialogue is the relationship between Pride Toronto and the Toronto Police Service. Together, we have decided that, in fact, it is important to listen to these views. Together, we have decided that these views are not often heard, and together we have decided that we are going to spend time over the next 12 months figuring out what that participation looks like. Bryn helpfully mentioned the DRP process, and here's the thing about the DRP process. The DRP process is meant to mediate conflict, and Pride Toronto does not see this as a conflict. We don't see communities who tell us that their relationship with an organization that we have a relationship with needs to be looked at. That's exactly what we did. We don't think it's a conflict, we think it's a conversation. And so there's no need to bring any outside mediator into a conversation where everybody around the table agrees that something needs to happen. But what I can say, well, what I feel, is that talking about either defunding Pride as an organization, or if not defunding Pride, fiddling about, if you will, with our finances, because we have chosen to have this conversation, we also feel is unjust and not fair. So we say this to you. As the biggest festival in this city, that is certainly, or the priority of this committee, as is the priority of Pride Toronto, is to make it as successful as possible. Pride Toronto, through its community, has done that. And we don't think, in fact, that it is necessary to be punished because of it. We think Pride Toronto should be celebrated for the position we're in now, because we don't see it as a negative position. We see us as a group of people who are willing to listen and who are willing to make sure that everybody is heard. Another thing about the DRP process is the police at some point chose to pull out. So I have made it clear through a statement and through an open letter that, in fact, the police have never been banned from our parade. They are not banned from our parade now. What we ask is that the police do not represent themselves, or individual LGBTQ police officers not represent themselves in the light of their uniform, their weaponry, or police vehicles. That is not banning. That is us as an organization responding to our constituents and suggesting to them that we respect what they think and feel. We will spend time thinking about what that looks like, and we will come to them with an answer that works for everybody, which is exactly what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions for our presenter? Okay, Councillor Nunziata, please proceed.
So there was a recommendation, a request from Mr. Hendricks as far as the security. So what are your thoughts about that?
I actually didn't understand that request, to be honest with you. It was a request to replace our funding with in-kind support. I'm sorry, can you repeat it or make it clear for me?
Well, it was my understanding that what Mr. Hendricks was pertaining to is that providing security for the parade, which you're requesting police services to provide that security, that you paid for that.
It's not a request of the police service. We have legitimately filed a permit to put on an event, and that legitimate filing requires the law to be there legally. So in that sense, they will be legally carrying out their duties, protecting the citizens of this city as the Toronto Police Service. That is not up for negotiation.
Okay, so if the police services are there providing the security, they're there with their cars, they're there with their guns, they're with their uniform, which is part of the parade.
Actually, when they are there, they're doing their job. When they are in the parade, they're invited by Pride Toronto and the community members that make up Pride Toronto.
So you mentioned that you want to listen to, at the beginning of your deputation, listen to everyone. So the petition that was submitted in today, so should those people that signed the petition not be listened to?
Oh, but we are listening to them. And we've listened to them, and we will continue to listen to them. Now, listening to these other members of the community that spoke to us doesn't negate not listening to those 8,000 people. It means we're listening to both, actually.
So listening to all the residents of City of Toronto, which their taxpayers are paying for the grant, should they be listened to?
The people who told us their experience also pay taxes. Everybody pays taxes from what I understand, and so everybody is heard in this context.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nunziata. Councillor Wong Tam.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Olivia, for your deputation. I just want to ask you to clarify Pride Toronto's position on police participation, which is sort of dominating today's discussion. When did Pride Toronto conclude that the police should march, but outside of uniform and not carrying guns or in vehicles, armored vehicles?
This actually isn't new. We have said it 4 times before now. We've always said, now, of course, the way in which our public town halls and our AGMs have been translated have not been through Pride Toronto. That narrative has developed outside of us as an organization. But we have never said that the police are banned from our parade. We don't believe either at any of our town halls or even, with all due respect, at our AGM, did we say the police and individual LGBTQ police officers are banned from the parade. What we did say is that in the context of our parade, there are certain elements that we would like not to see any longer. And we've spent time trying to figure out what that looks like so it can be clear to you. And now we are gratefully in a position to make that very clear.
When was your first statement to clarify police participation requesting outside of uniform?
Actually, it was before I started, and then soon after I started, actually. So when the police withdrew from the parade, I believe we put out a statement then, which from my recollection was February the 10th, actually. There's a clear Facebook statement that says the police are not banned from our parade. And then every interview I've done since has been some version of the police are not banned from our parade. Understanding that it wasn't clear enough, we put out not only a letter, but a statement clarifying that further.
Why do you think so much is lost in translation between your 4 public positions around police participation and clarifying that, and what is actually reported in the media and how it's actually carried out in the public dialogue through social media? Why is so much lost in translation as you see it?
I think a lot is lost in translation here for several reasons. One, I think there is not enough understanding about the whole, particularly LGBTQ plus community and their historic relationship with police services. And so I think if you are an outsider, you might be looking at that conversation and wondering how it became the way it did, wondering perhaps why it seems so polarized. That's because the history is decades long, and so I think that that's important. Secondly, I think it's important that as the City of Toronto itself has begun to look at more deeply, this issue of how Black communities experience life in Toronto, and particularly how queer communities of color experience life in Toronto, is perhaps not an often had conversation, and so it feels newer from the outside perspective, but actually inside our organization and inside the movement as a whole, there is a clear and strong tradition of working with communities who feel themselves marginalized by systems or by processes and trying to overcome those marginalizations.
With respect to the $260,000 culture funding that's before this committee today, how much of that actually goes towards the parade?
All of it.
To the parade or the culture festival?
All of it goes to the parade. All of it is about putting on the weekend festivities from the 22nd to the 25th. Are our signature festivities, and the parade is in a large part supported by the City of Toronto and its in-kind support through the variety of logistical plans and other supporting that we get from you.
If you were to lose the funding from the City of Toronto, will it affect your partnership with the provincial and federal governments as well?
Yes, it will.
And what will happen if all government funding was pulled out, all corporate funding was pulled out?
What would happen is we would get our communities together again. We would explain to them that in the context of our organization, there are significant issues around funding. We will always make sure a festival is put on, but we would do so within the confines of whatever financial environment that we find ourselves in. But we will always put on a festival.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Grimes, the question, take this into committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again. We met a couple weeks ago.
You too.
At the beginning of your deputation, you said the LGBT is the focus. And what do we say to the LBG community, which is in the police force now, that have made great strides, where we're seeing letters from, officer now in senior command positions? What are we saying to them?
What we're saying to them is that we value you as LGBTQ plus police officers. We value you as individuals. What we are also saying to them, though, is that as a service, between the Toronto Police Service and Pride Toronto, we have chosen to take a step back to better understand exactly what some of the feedback was that we received from our Pride Toronto community members. We are going to work together to try to figure a way through this as organizations. But that does not preclude individuals from marching in our parade. And we want to make that clear. We are about LGBTQ+ individuals and celebrating that within all of our communities. As it comes to the representation of services and organizations, yes, these are complicated conversations, but they are ones that Pride Toronto is utterly willing and able to have. What we are asking those officers is to give us time, given that we have not had this conversation before, to figure out what we need to do so that everybody can come back to the table feeling appropriately heard and feeling that they've been a part of the process of planning this festival.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Councillor Kelly, the question.
Olivia, you've got a tough job. If I may, you're framing the issue as one of misunderstanding by outsiders. Would you describe the three people, the deputants that preceded you, as outsiders?
You know, what I would describe the three deputants are three people who have a view different from my own, who've had life experiences different from my own. But I would also describe Pride Toronto as an organization that makes room for absolutely all of us. As Bryn himself mentioned, I have spoken to him, I have met with him, I have met with his entire constituents, amongst others. I've been out there meeting people. And for sure, my explanation to all of them is this. If a proportion of your community are telling you something that you perhaps don't know or understand, then, given the history of what our organization represents, the onus is upon us to step back and to make sure that absolutely everybody within our community experiences the same rights and the same levels of happiness that he has. But right now, that's not the case. And so it is his responsibility, as long as mine and everybody else's, to sit down and ask ourselves why that is. And upon asking ourselves why, figure out how we can work together to either address it or look like we're addressing it, and then move forward. But right now, we have not had that conversation. And so until we have that conversation, and until we understand each other a little better, we are asking that we be given time to do that before we come back to the table with a proposal that works for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Just a few questions from me.
Of course.
Okay, Councillor Frakadakis has questions. And members, if you could just let me know in the future that you have questions, that'd be really appreciated. Thank you.
I was paying attention to Olivia.
Well, the procedure is that you normally let the chair know that you have questions. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Olivia, I was just wondering, are you at present actively engaged in a dialogue conversation with the Toronto Police Service around this issue about participation and what that could look like
Yes.
going forward?
Yes, for sure. Like I say, it's been a most fruitful and productive relationship in the sense that we both kind of understand that perhaps we need to talk about more what going forward looks like, and we're both utterly in agreement that that's what we're going to do.
And going forward could, in the future, at some point, look like perhaps that the police could potentially participate in uniform if that is something that Pride Toronto and the decides that that's the direction that they would like to go in.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Oh gosh, in the future, anything is possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. So thank you. I was going to start on the trend that the councillor just spoken about. Can you help us to understand the board of directors for Pride Toronto?
Help you understand?
Yeah, like who's on the board? Who are the board members?
Our board members are elected from our membership. They tend to make up a range of the professions that one would need on a corporate board. So we have everybody from students to, tax accountants to lawyers, you name it. We run subcommittees. Those subcommittees generally tend to deal with a range of issues that come up. So for the most part, I would say our board are, as you saw from the AGM, they are elected in a kind of blind election process. There tends to be anywhere from, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's either 8 to 10 or 8 to 12. And we meet monthly, or they meet monthly. And for the most part, our board are full of a range of passionate, supportive, long-standing members of the Pride community who feel very strongly as everybody else does, about these issues.
Decisions that are being made by the board, you have the ability to determine who participates in the parade and who does not. So it's part of your, I guess, I'll call it your procedures, regulations, rules, et cetera?
Well, what tends to happen is we have an open registration for our parade and for our street fair. People will register online. We will have a look at that list. And when Bryn was referring to the DRP process, if there are any organizations or issues that come up as a result of that process, like Quia, it will go to a DRP process, and an independent panel will adjudge their inclusion or exclusion.
So to help me to understand, I realize you have just assumed your particular position and role. The issue around Quia, was there a call for banning that group or a group associated with that process? Was there a call to ban by the board?
Yeah, not by the board. So by
no, call to the board to ban.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, and this was from, I would just use the term, the public in general?
Exactly.
So on the one hand, you're being asked to ban one group, and the other hand, there's a supposition that you're banning another group, but I'm hearing that you don't have the right to ban that group, or part of what I'm hearing here today is that if you ban that group, we want to penalize you by retracting your funding.
Well, the question is whether or not the police are banned. And we're saying
I was going to get to that next.
Yeah, so, but if we're just talking about the principles of banning and not banning in relation to content, no, the board doesn't make that decision. Ultimately, it goes to this independent panel who ultimately make the decision.
So in this case, it didn't go to the independent panel because you didn't ban the police.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the dispute issue in terms of that mechanism didn't kick in because there was no banning.
Exactly. And then the police pulled out. And so there was then no further need to explore it because the police made it very clear that they were going to step back until we were able to have these conversations.
So as I've heard from many in the community, there are people who are angry that you banned the police. You're reiterating the fact that the police have not been banned, but the way it came out some time ago prior to your assuming the position, it was suggested, or at least it was communicated in a way that suggested there was a ban, and you're now clarifying that by both your statement and your media release.
Yes.
Right. So going forward, as part of the discussion and dialogue that has to take place with the police, you're saying that there have been issues with the police historically, with the community. Those issues have not been fully resolved. There's an opportunity in terms of moving forward to have dialogues to hopefully resolve those particular issues. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And those issues going through a process in terms of resolving, you, as I think you pointed out, you may or may not actually have the police in uniform, but that's a decision that the board will make at the appropriate time in conversation and consultation with the parties, being the police service, and I gather whoever else is involved. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor Thompson, exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we have two additional speakers who've added their names to the list, and I'm going to call them forward. David Morris. David Morris. Mr. Morris, thank you. Would you come forward, please? You have 5 minutes to speak, sir. I'll start your time when you said. Great. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi there. So my name is David Morris. I am the chair of the Board of Management of the 519. I am joined today by members of the staff, including several senior managers from the organization. For those who aren't aware, the 519 is a City of Toronto agency and a direct service agency to the community. We provide services and support to the LGBTQ community, and we act as a space for change and a space to promote advocacy and activism. At our board meeting on April 24th, the Board of Management voted unanimously to put out a call to the members of the Economic Development Committee as well as to Council to continue to support the Pride Toronto Festival through in-kind services and full funding. And this is done in response to our ongoing and consistent engagement with our community. We have thousands of clients, and we continue to hear from them about their experiences of marginalization, their feelings of isolation and being separated from the community. And so we believe that this is a conversation that's important and needs to continue to move forward. I think that the 519 also, as an organization, has taken the strong position that we need to move beyond a dialogue of who's in and who's out of the parade and more to a long-term resolution between racialized communities and an institution which has a history of discrimination. I hope it's not lost on this committee the irony of the presentation that happened previously in the agenda around youth justice and the barriers that especially Black youth face in trying to access employment after they leave the justice system. There are systemic issues here at play, and we want to continue to advance those conversations. And as you've heard from Pride Toronto, they've also made it quite clear in their presentation that they're in that conversation. We as the 519 also are a part of that conversation and wanting to work with communities and the police service to move to a long-term resolution. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up very quickly and say that as an organization, we want to continue to call on Council to continue to support the Pride Toronto Festival through full funding. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Are there any questions for our speaker? Okay. Visiting Councillor Wong Tam.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one quick question. Do you believe that the responsibility of participation should be left only to Pride Toronto and the Toronto Police around this issue?
I think that Pride Toronto is having thorough conversations with the community and that these decisions are not being made in isolation. And I think that the broader community is forming part of this discussion. And we as the 519 want to continue to play a part in that conversation as well. But again, this is beyond the issue of parades. This is about systemic racism within our community and within our city. And we want to continue to advocate and push for that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Bring it into committee. Any members of committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miroslav Glavik. Mr. Glavik? I'll start your time when you sit, sir.
1 second.
Okay, time has started, sir.
Hi, Norm. I don't speak for Pride Toronto. I participated as a volunteer and I work with different organizations, and that's Councillor Davis. And I seen Councillor Kelly. I seen you one time. I seen many times with Councillor Frederick, and she forgets to put a hat on in those sunny days, and she can get a headache.
Okay, sir. Just
I have an issue that there was a lot of talk that the police were banned, like Olivia said. Personally, I don't think the city should give the funding. When you invest, if you give me $1 and I give you $100 back, I've been participating in Pride Toronto for the past 11 years or so as an individual. The festivities should get the funding. If you invest $1 and you get 50 cents back, that's bad funding. If you give Pride Toronto $1 and they give you $1,000 back, that's a great investment. If the events don't happen when you all finish parading after the parade, and on the Saturday, you go outside and go to the local restaurants, participate in different events on Church Street. Nobody has been banned. There needs to be more discussion. All the groups get into. Olivia spoke most of what I was going to say, so there should be more discussions. All Councillor Grants and the rest of you should come again, but I think it's wrong by the idea that Councillor Campbell said that to remove the funding is a great investment. This is no different than TIFF or any other of parades. It brings jobs, it brings money to the local businesses. And Pride Month a couple of years ago, that brought a lot of money, a lot of visitors that spent their money in Toronto for the local small businesses in the area. The City of Toronto should do it. The same thing as the many members of the LGBTQ+ and any other letter I'm missing that are afraid of the police and the guns. I don't like weapons myself. I came from a third world country with issues with the police. You know, just like saying if somebody wants to put a parade and says, "Oh, group deserves to go to hell," you wouldn't put that. You know, it's the same thing. You should fund it, and all of you should attend. It's the best place to get beats, anyways. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Are there any questions, Mr. Glavick? Okay, see no questions. Okay, so members, we'll just questions of staff. Members, questions of staff. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Okay, Councillor Grimes, questions of staff.
Thank you. I don't know who I'm asking this to, but what is our city's policy on discrimination?
Well, we have the city's own discrimination policies, and we follow also the provinces against for a variety of reasons.
Is that tied to any funding?
We would not fund anybody that violated our discrimination policy.
Okay, so these police officers that will be marching, are they not city employees?
Yes.
So this doesn't go with our discrimination policy?
Actually, Mr. Williams, they're not city employees. They are employees of the Police Service Board.
Right.
Yeah, not city employees.
I took the question as a general one. As
yeah, no, they're not city employees.
But that, go ahead, sorry, Councillor.
So does this not fall under our discrimination policy?
That's correct.
So it does not?
Correct.
Okay.
Employment.
How many paid duty officers are with the parade? Do you know?
No, it's not very many. It's paid duty is focused mostly on the bars and commercial operations during the festival.
So the officers that work on the parade, are they? They come from recommendations from the command?
That's my understanding. You'd have to direct that question to police.
And then the parade doesn't pay for those officers.
That's my understanding. They do not.
The parade does not get billed for the officers.
Correct.
You get them for free.
Except for the ones that they use for paid duty on the bars, etc.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grimes. Any other questions of staff? Okay. I just have a couple, Mr. Williams. Through you, so when you look at this issue, you're suggesting at this point that there are no elements that would be deemed or presumed to be discriminatory in any actions that's being taken by said organization, and it has been stated by the organization that they're not banning any group from participation?
There are no grounds that there are no reasons that violate any of the grounds that we use in evaluating programs.
Right. And you put all of these grant applicants through the same lens?
Correct.
There are no multicolor lens on any of the applicants for grants that are being recommended in this document?
I don't understand what you meant by multicolor.
Well, I meant that, quite frankly, are there any really nefarious issues associated with respect to the application as such?
I hope not.
Okay, that you could determine. Now, can you help us to understand the values and benefits associated with, and I'll just ask the questions with respect to all of the groups that are here listed. There's an assumption that there's an economic benefits associated with the city, and that's part of the contribution?
That's correct.
Right. And so in the case of Pride Toronto, what is the economic impact to the city in having this event in the City of Toronto?
I'm trying to remember the numbers, Councillor, but I think it's around $50 million was the last economic impact study that I saw come from Pride.
Right. And you would agree with me that a independent board of any of these organizations that are listed here on your list will make decisions for those organizations?
Correct.
And decisions are made by those organizations. If you found or deemed them to be contrary of any city policy, you would do what based on an action? Would you simply remove funding because they've asked for funding, or would you have dialogue and discussion to get clarification on the issue that you may be concerned with or your staff?
We would delve into that at great length with any group that we were concerned with about any of the criteria we'd use to fund them. And if they continued to be offside on those, then we would recommend not funding them.
Can you identify any areas that you would define as being offside by any of these groups that's listed in this list?
None.
If there were any that were offside, you would not be recommending, is that correct?
That's correct.
You're recommending, I believe, I think it's 13 on my count, 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 groups that are here for funding?
That's correct.
Right. And you again restate the fact that there is nothing that you understand that would disqualify any of the group that's listed on this list?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. All right. To speak, Councillor Kelly is the first person I have on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right up front, I'm going to let you know that I'll be supporting the city's contribution to Pride Toronto. These are my thoughts, Chair. Pride Toronto has come a long way over the decades. It has not only been able to extend their embrace to the police, but to the general public in the City of Toronto. This is one of the major parades that Torontonians look forward to, not only watching on the street or on TV, but actually walking in the parade. You know, I've done that several times, and it's good fun. I'm going to bring a water gun, I think a cannon, to help defend myself in the upcoming parade. But no matter how you interpret this issue, I think it's fair to say that both from inside the LGBTQ community and outside, the issue of police involvement in the parade is perceived as a step backwards in the relationship not only between the police and Pride, but the general public and Pride as well. Olivia has asked for time. She's brand new to the job, and I'm certainly willing to give her the time needed to listen to the participants to this issue. Now, it's always easier to negotiate your way to a consensus if the players are clustered left and right close to the center. But if you have players that are to the extreme on the spectrum, where positions tend to be more rigidly held, then, boy, it's a real test of leadership, and I certainly wish Olivia well, and I know that she will have the support not only of this committee, but I would assume of this council as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Any further speakers? Councillor Grimes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to say I think this is one of the premier festivals we have in the City of Toronto. It's a great event, and I wholeheartedly support it. And as Councillor Kelly said, the people of Toronto look forward to this parade, but it's just not the people of Toronto. I had the opportunity to traveled to Florida this summer. I met a couple gentlemen that came to Toronto first because it was the first place to come here and get married. So we are world leaders now. So the world looks forward to this this parade. People come from all over the world. With that, I'm kind of surprised as reading through the report that this does comply with the grants policy. I didn't think it would, but it does. But you know, reading on this executive summary from the Community Advisory Panel, there was a perfect storm back in 2009 and 2010 with the Queers Against Israel apartheid. So I think this is kind of another one of those, and I don't think it's over yet. I think there's going to be more. I'm worried about sponsorship being pulled for this festival, but I did have a chance to sit down with Olivia a couple weeks ago in a private meeting with her, and they are new. They got their work cut out for them. They don't have a big staff behind them to figure this out, but I know they are talking with Chief Saunders, and they are trying to work things out. So I don't think this is the end we're going to hear of it. I think this will probably be debated largely at council, but I wish them luck in the negotiations. Hopefully a good resolution can come to this and be sorted before the parade gets here this summer. Thank you.
Councillor Prakadakis?
Yeah, I'll be brief in my remarks, and I'll be supporting the recommendations, and I have to say I'm encouraged by the new leadership's comments today that they're in discussions, active discussions and a dialogue with all the parties to try to come to some kind of resolution. And so, you know, I've read the report, and I believe the staff when they say that these things are in compliance. So, so that's it, and I'm sure we'll have a fulsome discussion at council later this month around this issue as well. So we'll look forward to that debate.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm going to move the recommendations that are in the report. I first of all want to thank all of the presenters who've come to speak today. You know, the really cool thing about our city and the people in this city is that no matter how difficult a situation or a matter is, we actually can bring cooler heads to prevail. And while I understand that there's a lot of work to be done, and for those who are doing the work, I wish you really well in this. I want to thank particularly the Executive Director for Pride Toronto. I've had as well private meetings with her, and I think that her passion and energy that she brings to this organization will help the organization. I've had in the past meetings with other members of the organization and so on, but I detect a different sense of not only ability but also passion for the new Executive Director. Clearly, we have some of the finest men and women who are in policing in the world in this city. There's no doubt about that. But we also know we have challenge with the Toronto police and men and women in that organization. I can't point the finger at which one specifically, but we hear from groups, whether or not it's a racialized group or the groups involved in Pride and others who've come forward. Clearly, we want to find a solution. The Executive Director has indicated that she's going to be working with the Chief of Police, the police, and others in the community and so on to try to bring a resolve to this impasse, or well, actually it's no longer, I'll take the word impasse back, but this issue. Obviously, it's historical in nature, and it has been ongoing for some time, and there's effort, I think, from all sides to try to bring a resolution and resolve. I'm not supportive of any measures that will penalize an organization that is not breaking any city rules. And so we've heard from the staff that there are no rules that are being broken. I'm quite familiar with governance and corporate governance and so on, and board of directors and so on. The boards can make decisions on behalf of their membership, their organization, and so on. If those are discriminatory in nature or in how we measure this, we obviously have an obligation as a city to respond. We've heard from the General Manager of Economic Development that none of this occurs in this process. Oftentimes we hear what we want to hear, and what we hear is then discussed and reviewed and talked about, and sometimes it changes from what we've actually heard. I had not heard that the police were banned from the parade. I had heard that police personnel were not invited to participate in their uniforms. That's what I'd heard through this whole process. And I did ask the question, are the personnel banned? And I was told, no, they're not. We require that they come and participate in whether or not it's their the traditional costumes that people tend to wear, or things that were non-uniform in nature. And so that's what the organization has, the executive director has said to us today. That's what their communication has stated, and so on. And so there's work to be done, and I have no doubt there'll be more discussion and dialogue at council and submissions and so on. But I think the public should understand what we've heard today from the executive director, because that's the person I'm going to take my cue from, that there is not a ban on Toronto Police participating in the Pride Festival activities that will take place. Pride, the festival itself, is world-renowned. Pretty well everywhere I go, I hear from people about the fact that they've either come to Toronto or have heard about Pride and how wonderful this particular festival is. Whether or not you are part of the community or the broader community, the fact of the matter is we celebrate Pride. We appreciate Pride. We love Pride in this city. It has great benefits to our city, economic, otherwise, and social, as well as for those young people who find themselves in challenges in terms of trying to identifying their sexuality and so on. Pride is that ability that opens their eyes and opens sort of the perspective in just being who they want and choose to be without any sort of form of either retribution or anything else from our city. That's something that we ought to recognize, and that's something we ought to celebrate. So adults are having some dispute or discussion about how they go forward. Let's take the adult position and sit down and dialogue. I think that we ought to proceed with respect to the funding for Pride. I think we are not get into a great debate. Allow the group to go, discuss, and come back to us. They've told us they're going to do that. Please give them that opportunity. Councillor, you were out of the room when we started. I will actually, if members will allow, just deviate and go back and just give you the opportunity to speak on this particular issue. Okay?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. I do appreciate it. This particular matter before us is obviously one that is of great importance. I think that all the deputants should be applauded for taking the time to join us today. There is clearly a wide range of opinions in the community, and this is a community that I know to be hyper-diverse. It's a community that is one that is steeped in the discussions around intersectionality. There is no one monolithic position within the LGBTQS community. That's just not before us today. It is simply a community that has a wide range of constituents, and that means that it takes time for the community to sort through the dialogue. It means that when friction does occur, we have to sit down and have those conversations. And I think that the other thing that I want to point out is that Pride Toronto is a sexual liberation movement. It is political. It is one that has individuals who have different lived experiences than myself as an able-bodied cis woman. It will also have members of the community who have a very different relationship with Toronto Police, whatever that may be. I don't want to silence anyone, and I think it's rather important for us to recognize that this is a festival that has emerged out of a protest movement. And there are those in our community, I think, that will probably say, that's okay. Let's get rid of all the police, all the city funding. Let's get rid of all the government funding, and let's continue to demonstrate. But that has, I think, in large part, been an evolutionary conversation that has now morphed into one of the biggest cultural celebrations, not just in Toronto, but pretty much in North America and around the world. It would be a horrible, I think, if the City of Toronto was even, or if anybody on City Council was to even table a motion to defund Pride. I think it actually sends the wrong message for a city that is growing at the pace that it is. It's also going to send the wrong message for us as a city that is embracing of cultural funding. And as Toronto has been the leader across Canada around these issues, around the sexual liberation movement, it just does not bode well for a community when we are being told by those who perhaps never even marched in the Pride Parade that the funding should be taken away. And I think it's absolutely critical for us to recognize that there perhaps may be a merger of forces that are now before us, that it's just too convenient for us to scapegoat Pride Toronto. This is a hard job that they have. They are being asked to be all things to all people, and they are trying desperately to make sure that the door is open. I have had personal conversations now with the police chief. I've had personal conversations with Pride Toronto. I've received correspondence from the widest range of individuals, and there is a very broad range of opinions out there. The one thing I do know is that we have to keep the doors open, and by taking any gesture to defund Pride on the floor of council during the city council meeting will set back relations in ways that we cannot even imagine. Black Lives Matter specifically had issues with police presence. I may not agree with their tactics. I may not even agree with the message and the demands of the day. But what I know that it is my job as a member of the community is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. And that means absolutely everybody, especially those in the community who are often seen as voiceless, especially those in the community who are oftentimes already marginalized. That includes sex workers. That includes our transgendered folks. That includes people who are Indigenous, people who are living in Toronto without status. That includes Black people and people of color. They experience the world in different ways that I cannot imagine. I cannot tell them what is right or wrong. I just have the opportunity to listen. And that's what Pride does. Pride actually allows us all to come together to have that discussion. It doesn't mean that there is one position that's right or one position that's wrong. It just means that the hard work that Olivia and her team are doing is to be applauded. It means that
Thank you, Councillor.
It also means that.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to spend another 30 seconds? Because if you do, we have to move a motion to extend because.
Sorry, I didn't realize that you were breaking for lunch.
12:30. Yeah. The agenda is finished. This is the last item. Okay, thank you. All right, so the item as presented by staff and moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Okay. I don't know. I'm just feeling on the gavel today. I'm feeling on the gavel. It's like stay right on the gavel. Right on time. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Yeah. I don't want to waste people's time.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Yep.
You know what? To be quite honest, like it's a tough one because we never really get a chance to have
I didn't.
But it's so.
I was there.
I heard it.
Yeah, I was there and I covered it. Okay. So I actually found you in the
Yes.
So we can talk about good neighbors again. No. I've been in discussion.
Yeah.